Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and welcome to another edition of RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. We're here in Warsaw, Poland for the 12th edition of the Global Forum on Nicotine, the annual conference on safer nicotine products and tobacco harm reduction. Joining me here is Peter Beckett, the publisher of Clearing the Air. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. This is a great opportunity to have a last-minute interview with you. I've been watching your content for years.
Well, and I've been reading Clearing the Air. Why don't you tell our viewers what Clearing the Air is?
So the genesis is fairly simple. There's a lot going on in nicotine policy that's kind of complicated to understand and isn't necessarily instinctive to the viewer or the reader. But mainstream media outlets don't necessarily cover it with the care or the color that it deserves. I don't necessarily blame the mainstream media for that. They have a lot going on in their lives. They have a world that appears to be falling apart at the seams and all sorts of other things that they need to cover. They could be doing a better job of nicotine coverage than they are doing, but I don't blame them for not having daily coverage. And what the market really needed was daily coverage. So what we decided to do was put together something that can give people that wanted a little bit more granularity, a little bit more regularity in the coverage, a little bit more color in what they see. And that's what's evolved into the Clearing the Air that we see today.
Now, you're based in Brussels.
That's right, yeah.
But you cover a wide range.
We're primarily focused on Europe. We publish in 6 different languages now. As well as English, we are in Polish, we're in Spanish, we're in French, we're in German, and we're in Italian. Thanks to AI, we're able to do that, and we get readers from all over the continent. But we do have a lot of readers in America, we do have a lot of readers in Australia, and we try to offer content for them as well.
Now, I have to tell you that you guys have been a great resource for us.
Awesome. I'm really glad we're having an impact.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And you seem to be on the issues, covering the issues as they're happening.
So one of the things that we really wanted to do was not just report on things that are happening, we wanted to break stories. So not so very long ago, we were the first publication to break the contents of the upcoming EU tax regulation that's going to be debated at European level at some point in the next few months. We were the first people to get that. We covered stories about whether or not the Commission had followed their own internal procedures in reviewing the tobacco legislation that's out there, and we were the only outlet to do that. So we kind of try to offer a level of quality journalism that we just found, with the exception of you guys, hasn't been on the market. That means breaking stories as well as simply providing opinion. Now, bluntly, anybody in our world understands the basic premise of tobacco harm reduction and understands the logic of it. So we try to go a little bit deeper into the stories than just making the core argument.
So let's go through some of the areas that we cover. Canada. What does Clearing the Air know about Canada?
Large country, lots of snow, occasional seal hunting. That's our. We're not great experts in Canada, I have to say. I understand there's been a pouch ban that has been really quite unfortunate. And I think that you did in Canada have what looked like a very solid basis to go on with the initial regulations, and we thought that we had a government that, while it wasn't totally comfortable saying the words harm reduction, was willing to implement the basic policies that would allow harm reduction to take place within society. And what we seem to be seeing now under late Trudeau and early Carney is that that's being rolled back a little, which is disappointing. I hope Mark Carney appears to me to be a sensible and pragmatic bloke, and with any luck, that'll change.
What about the US?
Geez, where to begin? Without wishing to mire myself in US politics writ large, it's very difficult to know which way the pig on acid is going to run at this point. I think that the policy that they appear to have settled on by default, which is allowing the whole thing to be governed by FDA enforcement discretion, has been shown not to work. And the American media ecosystem has done what it does best, which is churn out pointless clickbait that essentially misleads people. So there's a messaging problem, and then there's a regulatory problem that Congress can't seem to get them out of. Which way does it go? Who knows? I think that America's a great place for all nicotine products. I think that the American consumer's used to those. And I hope, if nothing else, that fact will continue to mean that smoking rates in America go down. But it's very, very difficult to determine whether or not that's what's going to happen.
So what about Michael Bloomberg?
So Often I like to think of the other side as people who mean well but are misguided. But with Michael Bloomberg, I'm finding that an increasingly difficult position to maintain, because the facts are there and the facts have been there for a very long time. Without getting into a personal slanging match, I think that any good that he is doing with the WHO in other areas, in infectious disease, for example, is probably being wiped out by the harm he is doing by supporting the demonization of safer nicotine products.
Is he doing it, say, from a religious fervor?
I have no idea if he's religious or not. I think he's Jewish, isn't he?
I don't know.
I think he's Jewish. I say that because I'm also Jewish, and I don't think that there's anything in the Jewish religion that says tobacco harm reduction shall not pass.
Right, and I think the point that I'm trying to make is that it doesn't need to be a religion for it to be religious.
I see your point. So is it an article of faith rather than an article of science? Well, for a man who's best known for saying, only God may judge me and everybody else come with data, he does seem somewhat unwilling to accept the direction in which the data should be taking his thinking, which is sad. And I don't really know what you do about that. And it's something that bothers me, not just about Bloomberg, the man, but about the tobacco control movement in general. We in the vaping industry have taken, not the vaping industry, but in the vaping community, have taken tobacco control to be our enemy, and that shouldn't be the case. I'll just tell if you'll give me a little bit of rope here. So when I first got into the vaping world, it was as a lobbyist. I'm a classically trained Brussels lobbyist. And I was working for the E-Cigarette Industry Trade Association, which was the British association at the time that was trying to prevent an EU-wide ban on vaping products. And my first thought when I walked in the door was, the tobacco companies are going to hate me and the tobacco control guys are going to absolutely love me. So what I'll do is I'll go and talk to all of the NGOs in tobacco control and we'll make a deal and we'll go up against the horrible cigarette people. That is not what happened. I did not even get into those doors. I was immediately tarred with, you are part of the tobacco industry. I barely even met a tobacco industry executive at that point in my life. And that was when I started to realize that not everything in this world makes sense. And now when I talk to people who are coming into the space, the first thing I say to them is, don't wait for it to start making sense, because it's not going to.
Isn't that amazing that tobacco control is so upside down and backwards, and the science, their approach to science is so upside down and backwards that the only thing you can do is throw your hands up and go, they're not making any sense.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that the cut through that the scientific arguments have had, particularly among legislative politicians, has been disappointing. And I don't know how to improve that. What I do know is that every campaign that I've been involved in, the thing that works is engagement from voters. So if what we do encourages a couple more people to write to their representatives or to go to public meetings or to understand a little bit more about the debate and use that understanding in furtherance of what is their own personal interest, that's kind of what we're aiming for.
What about the UK?
So I'm a little bit conflicted on this one. So I am a lifelong member of the British Labour Party, which is now in government. And I've been a supporter of it my entire life. But going back to that time where I first started out in this sector, it was a member of the British Labour Party in the European Parliament who was the biggest proponent of a Europe-wide ban on vaping products. And I've never really quite understood why it has been predominantly the left that have been so religious, as you put it, on this issue. We now have a Labour government in the UK after however many years of Conservative government, which I disagreed with on the vast majority of issues, but which on this issue happened to have quite sensible, pragmatic policy. And we're starting to see the rhetoric shift. Now in the UK, we're lucky because what we have is permanent civil servants who are steeped in the arguments of harm reduction, many of whom were involved in harm reduction before it even involved tobacco, when it was about HIV prevention. So they really understand and get it in a way that I don't see in a lot of other countries, which is why I don't think you'll see the UK go down the absolutist route that you see in countries like the Netherlands or you see in countries like Ireland. I could be wrong about that, but I do think that we are relatively safe in the UK.
But the UK is no longer the bastion.
Yeah, I think that's true to say, but what I would say at the same time is that there is still that baseline of understanding within the permanent civil service and within the government. And I think that will stand us in good stead. It is unfortunate that we are now starting to see rhetoric out of Action on Smoking and Health under Hazel Cheeseman that frankly would never have seen under previous management.
Well, speaking from across the pond, we used to point to the UK as the leader and we should follow. And what's happened is that what's happened in the UK has taken that away from us in at least North America to be able to point to the UK.
Yeah, and that's kind of sad that we don't necessarily have a government that's putting its all behind harm reduction anymore and that is trying to hedge its bets because it thinks it might be smart politics rather than say what the data says, which is always what the UK has been very good at, and that is a shame. I don't know who takes up that mantle now. Maybe it's the Czech Republic, maybe it's New Zealand. I don't know, but we are missing that.
Final question is, what's next for clearing the air?
So our big focus over the next few years is going to be the revision of rules governing tobacco products and tobacco taxation in Europe. I am very much anti-smoking, and I will not be advocating for anything other than the harshest of the harshest on anything that you burn. And we'll be saying that publicly, but we are entering a period of significant risk in the European Union because once all of this sentiment finds its way into legislation, then there will be no turning back and it'll be very, very difficult to make any changes at the member state level. So we've had a lot of very interesting scoops. We've been the first to get drafts of the tobacco tax directive, which we put online for everybody to see. We're going to keep doing in-depth reporting like that. We're going to keep making sure that particularly Europeans are informed about what's going on, and we're going to be introducing a few new tools to help them parse and understand the data that's out there, make it easier for them to get in touch with their elected representatives. And once the campaign begins, we'll be following it very, very closely with the aim of being the place that everybody goes to for information, not just people in tobacco harm reduction, not just the community, but politicians. We want to be ahead of Politico and Euractiv and the Financial Times on these issues because we think we've got the journalistic skills to do it.